Hare Krishna. So, dear students of Sannyasa College and other listeners, I'm happy to be with you again for our third session on Madhurya kadambini. And from the very beginning, I told you that I will not be in a hurry to cover the whole book, because it's an important book and we have to really dwell and meditate deeply on the words of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, because he is explaining in a very minute details what is happening in our heart and in our lives when we start practicing bhakti. And it's not so smooth. Oftentimes we repeat after Srila Prabhupada that path of bhakti is easy and joyful. It is indeed easy and joyful in one sense, but at the same time, the internal obstacle, the scale of the internal obstacles remains, and we have to overcome these obstacles. And for that, we have to know the intricacies and know very well the obstacles which we meet. So we more or less cursory covered the first chapter where Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was explaining the independent and self-manifested nature of bhakti. And basically, in gist, his main message was that bhakti has to be obtained from the heart of a devotee. And it's a special good fortune of a soul to get in touch with such a devotee who can give bhakti. And bhakti can only be given from heart to heart. And in the second chapter, he started describing the initial stages of bhakti, covering Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, and Bhajana Kriya, and to a certain extent Anartha Nivriti. Anartha Nivriti will be the subject of the third chapter. And he is explaining in more details how this Shraddha in Bhakti appears, and also why the path of Bhakti starts with Shraddha. Here I want to make a very important footnote, so to speak, to what we have already said. Because we said that, and oftentimes we say that Bhakti is the qualification, Shraddha is the qualification to practice Bhakti. It's not correct. It's not 100% correct, because you can practice Bhakti without having any faith. Bhakti is such a powerful process that it doesn't require faith to practice it. Anyone can practice Bhakti, and so many people practice Bhakti. As we said, one of the characteristics of Bhakti, it's all-pervading, it's everywhere. And basically everyone practices some sort of Bhakti or some sort of devotional service. And most of the people who practice this sort of Bhakti, they don't have faith in Bhakti, in the process of Bhakti. So faith, Shraddha, is the qualification to practice Uttama Bhakti or Ananya Bhakti, undeviated devotional service. You can practice Bhakti without faith, but you cannot practice Ananya Bhakti, Uttama Bhakti, pure devotional service, undeviated devotional service without faith. That's the difference. Faith serves like a lens which concentrates your endeavors. And because the powerful faith is there, your endeavors become channeled into this one channel, and for that you require faith. Without faith, you can be practicing Bhakti, you can be practicing so many other things, and ultimately your energy will be dissipated to many different channels. But faith helps you to channel your energy in one channel, in one way, and helps you to practice in this way the devotional service, undeviated devotional service. So I want to reiterate few things from the last lecture because it's very important how Shastriya Shraddha or real Shraddha appears in the heart. Srila Jiva Goswami says, commenting this famous verse from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam about the power of associating with devotees, Bhava Pavarga Brahmato Yada Bhave Janasya Tar Achyuda Sat Samagamah Sat Sangamo Yarhitadaiva Sadgato Paravaresha Tvai Jayate Matih. In this verse, it is said that as soon as we meet with the devotees, already the path of liberation is open for us. And the main result of meeting with the devotees is Tvai Jayate Matihi. The main result of meeting with the devotees is that we obtain a certain form of intelligence. Intelligence which is directed towards the Supreme Lord. That's the effect, that's the result. When we meet with the devotees, all of a sudden our intelligence, our mind will be directed towards the Supreme Lord. And Srila Jiva Goswami, commenting on this verse, he says, Satsangamena Ratyankura Rupaiva Matir Jayata iti. By the association with sadhu, Satsangamena, the desire to do Krishna bhajana, Ratyankura Rupaiva Matihi. This mati, this special sort of intelligence which comes to us, special sort of understanding what we are supposed to do in life, is coming to us, and this intelligence tells us you should do bhajan. You should do Ratyankura, this little ankur, little sprout of this rati, attachment to the Supreme Lord, comes just by even the moment of association. Therefore it is said, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha Sarva Shastra Koi. So I also last time kind of described how this Shastriya Shraddha appears, because Shraddha is the first stage. And all the acharyas, they define Shraddha, first stage, as the implicit faith into the meaning of the Shastra. So how this can happen? How is it possible? How is it from the outset you can develop this implicit faith in the statements of Shastras? What it means? Does it mean this initial Shraddha, or it means Nishta, the firm faith? No, it means also initial Shraddha. So how it appears, we have to understand. It appears in stages. First we meet with the devotee, and the respect, certain veneration towards a devotee appears within the heart. We see a representative of a different species of life. We see a devotee and we see his demeanor, we see his behavior, we see his attitude towards others. And moreover, by this initial sympathy or initial respect which we can develop towards this dignified human being, we also come in touch with his bhakti, with the bhakti in his heart. And we feel, literally feel his selflessness. And because we feel his selflessness, his spirit of sacrifice, his desire to help, even by the cost of his own comforts and everything else. We come in touch with his bhakti because this is the qualities which bhakti gives to a human being. And by coming in touch with this, we actually become transformed. I like very much the story which Giriraj Maharaj tells about his first meeting with Srila Prabhupada. He came as a student, and before that he was in a campus, and he was in some sort of involved in different esoteric practices, yoga this, yoga that, visiting different lectures of some sannyasis, swamis or whatever. And he asked Srila Prabhupada, what is this, how you distinguish, because everyone says this is the best. My path is the best, follow me. So he asked Srila Prabhupada after the lecture, how do you know that this is a genuine guru, this is a genuine sadhu? And Prabhupada, he gave a very unexpected, in one sense, answer. He says, it really depends what you want. If you want to become a servant of God, or if you want to become God. And Giriraj Maharaj says that immediately it struck him because in his hostel, in his room in the hostel, there was a big poster, you should become God. One Swami saying something like this. And when Prabhupada answered this, he realized that he sees his heart. And, so, in other words, Prabhupada answered, your choice, how you develop faith in a spiritual master will be depending on what you want. If you want to become God yourself, then you will accordingly choose somebody who will teach you how to become God. And Prabhupada then, of course, smashed this idea. He said that Krishna has always been God and will always be. And if you're not God now, you don't have much chances to become one. So this initial respect which a devotee commands, not demands, but commands, brings some beginning Shraddha, because Shraddha means respect. Srila Prabhupada tells that if we just like devotees, this is already Shraddha, this is some sort of faith in this path. And then by developing this respect, you will start hearing this particular person with a specific attitude, which will give you the understanding of Shastra. If you listen the same person with challenging spirit, with some sort of, neglectful spirit, overlooking him or whatever, trying to, not overlooking, but, trying to look with some, with some haughtiness in the heart, listen with some challenge, what is he saying? He's saying, like also Giriraj Maharaj tells a story. Prabhupada went to a public program in Harvard University, and there were so many questions after the lecture. And one student raised a hand and asked Prabhupada, have you seen God? And Prabhupada said, if I tell you, yes, I have seen God, will you believe me? And the person said, no, I will not. He said, then why should you ask this question? You already said you will not believe it. So what's the use? So if you listen with this sort of attitude, you will never be able to understand what sadhu is supposed to, sadhu is bringing to you, what is the message of the sadhu. But if you develop the proper attitude, then gradually you will get the understanding of the Shastra. You will listen by retaining the essence of what is being said. When we listen with this other attitude, we don't extract the essence. We only superficially engaged in the process of hearing. We're not really grasping the proper essence. And that's the second stage of developing this Shastriya Shraddha. Then what will happen when you listen for some time the same sadhu, and it's essential, Srila Jiva Goswami says that initially you will listen many different sadhus, but then when your heart becomes attracted to one particular person, to his presentation, then you should limit yourself. You shouldn't listen to too many. After some time, you may again resume this habit of listening many, but in the initial stage, when you want to develop real Shraddha, you have to listen to one person, because by listening to one person, you will be able to create a coherent system. The knowledge of the Shastras will not remain a chaotic collection of different facts or different quotes or whatever, because the person who is telling you, having this coherent system, complete, wholesome system with different connection between different parts of this understanding, and you will be able to get this coherent system, and by that your doubts will dissipate, because initially, naturally, we have many doubts within the core of our hearts, because we want to enjoy in this world, and so many doubts may be there. But you listen, you stick listening one person, and by listening to one person, you ultimately develop a very systematic understanding of Shastra. And by developing this systematic understanding of Shastra, you will get the firm faith in devotional service, in the process of devotional service. Very firm faith in the meaning of Shastra, and then the next stage, you will surrender yourself. Because surrendering is a very fearful process. Before you have firm faith, it's very difficult to surrender. You always will keep some sort of, how you say this, you will not be able to surrender to one path. Like Arjuna initially in Bhagavad Gita. In Bhagavad Gita initially he says, Shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapanam. I'm the soul surrendered unto you. But immediately he says, no, nayosya iti Govinda, but I'm not going to fight. So this initial surrender, it's conditional surrender, but when you get the complete understanding of Shastra, then your surrender will become more mature, more complete, and in this way you will be able to practice bhakti fearlessly without the fear that you're losing something else, that you're losing something valuable in the life, that you are, pursuing some path which ultimately will not bring you to the goal. No, the firm faith will bring you to the stage of surrender. The stage of surrender will give you the desire to act actively. As we said, this is a very important characteristic of Shraddha. You will act very consistently, because also you will get the hope to achieve goal. The systematic understanding of Shastra will give you a very clear understanding of what is the goal, and very clear path to achieve the goal. And then with this you get the goal. You know that even if you don't get the goal, if you don't achieve the goal in this life, you will achieve it in the next life, because there is no loss in diminution. I will reach to this goal. That's for sure. And then after that, person give up his selfishness. He stops acting for his own benefit, for his own selfish benefits, sva-artha. He gives up damba. And then the next stage, very important stage, which I mentioned, is that he stops offending other devotees. That's a result of firm faith in the process of devotional service and into the import of Shastra and the meaning of the Shastra. So it's a sort of stretched process. It doesn't come immediately, but ultimately this faith is a very glorious thing, and therefore we have complete right to say that when we attain this Shastriya Shraddha in a real sense, then it's already a great achievement. We should not undermine this achievement, because all the essential elements of prema is there in this Shraddha, which is the first stage. And, prema can only come from this kind of Shraddha. It will never be developed from other kinds of Shraddha, because, the result is there, the consequences in the cause. So the cause should contain the result of it. So this Shraddha is very important. Therefore, I spent a lot of time by describing this and reiterated this again. And then also very important thing, who is capable, who among the sadhus can give you this Shraddha. Because we say that apichet suduracharo bhajate mamananya bhak sadureva samantavyah. He is sadhu, even he performs all kinds of sinful activities. Does it mean that by associating with such a sadhu who performs all kinds of abominable activities but still have a firm faith into devotional service, we can develop faith? No. That's a good news. Srila Jiva Goswami, he discriminates. He says there may be sadhu, there may be sadhottara, and there may be mahat, the greatest sort of sadhu. He said that the sadhu who can help us to develop faith in the process of devotional service has to behave perfectly. He has to be a perfect gentleman. His sadachar should be unquestionable. The other people, they're also sadhus. We respect them, because they are firmly determined to achieve the goal, they are practicing devotional service. But if we see that they are not really following all the details of Vaishnava sadachar, they are not gurus. They are sadhus, but they are not gurus. And they will not help us to develop this faith. On the contrary, they may undermine our faith in the process of devotional service, because we will see this external behavior without understanding the internal determination to practice devotional service. So we should carefully avoid, especially in the beginning, associating with such people who don't have integrity and who don't follow very strictly Vaishnava sadachar. And therefore, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he concludes this section by saying that there is svabhaviki shraddha, and the shraddha which will develop naturally when you associate with sadhu of the highest caliber. Satam prasangam mama virya samvido, pavanti hrit karna rasayana katha. So tajoshanam ashva pavargam vartmani shradhara tir bhaktira nukramishyati. So that will be very smooth and ashu apavargam vartmani. This path to apavarga, to liberation in bhakti, in love, will become very clear, very open to you, if you can say like this. Will become open to you, and Shraddha, Rati, and Bhakti or Prema will develop in a very quick way. So that's Svabhaviki way, natural way to develop Shraddha. And why it is Svabhaviki? Because the sadhu of this caliber, he also very naturally performs this bhakti. And his sort of, naturality, I don't know if you can say like this, but his sort of natural approach towards bhakti also comes to our heart. We can see that he can become very happy, he can become very relaxed by practicing bhakti. It's not something really, such a struggle. Like Prabhupada, he was a very relaxed person. I heard one story about Prabhupada. He came to France and he was traveling for a long time, and many, many devotees came, a few hundred devotees came to hear, and Prabhupada sat on Vyasasana. He said a few words, and then he started dozing. He started sleeping right there on Vyasasana. And then, he comfortably laid down. So he was very relaxed. He was not tense. Because it was his way of living, and therefore also for us this natural attitude towards bhakti becomes natural. We imbibe this natural attitude towards bhakti, and understanding of bhakti also becomes very natural. Whereas the other kind of shraddha is balatutpadita, when we force ourselves to practice bhakti, and yes, we have some faith, but this faith is socially determined, and there is some social pressure, and we basically want to remain in the society of devotees, and for that we practice bhakti. Our main motivation is not bhakti itself, but desire to be in this association of devotees, and this phase doesn't go too far. As I said, that the natural phase will very quickly dissipate our doubts, but this sort of phase, the doubts will always be lingering as a saving grace for us to somehow or other to justify ourselves to deviate from the path of bhakti. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, of course, described sadhu sangha. What sadhu sangha means? Sadhu sangha means guru sangha. We accept this devotee as a guru who created this sort of faith in us. We take formal initiation from him, and we inquire from him about Vaishnava Sadachar. That's a very important point. He will have to tell us, this is your sadhana, this is what you should do. And that's why during the initiation we give the vow to follow four regulative principles. That's Vaishnava Sadachar, which according to the tradition Srila Prabhupada established in ISKCON, we obtain. So this Vaishnava Sadachar from that point on will become our firm determination to follow this Vaishnava Sadachar, because that's the part of our contract, so to speak, spiritual contract. And as I said, that he will bring us to the society of loving devotees, association with whom will help us to develop certain mood. Very important thing, that the sadhu sangha means developing certain mood. Shraddha mostly means developing certain understanding of Shastra, but sadhu sangha helps us to develop mood, the service attitude, and a special mood of service towards the Supreme Lord. It may be, it's the initial tinge of this bhava, which will be developed on the later stages of our spiritual development. It may be Sakya mood, or it may be Vatsalya mood, or it may be Madhurya mood. It's very subtle. It may not be so pronounced. It doesn't mean that, but still, you can feel the mood of a person, and you can feel the mood of of his associates, the devotees around him, and you're attracted to this mood, and by associating with this guru and his devotees, you also develop similar attitude, similar mood of service, similar way of servicing, because this is, how we want to serve. And service always implies a certain emotional element in it. If it's only intellectually driven, it's not service in a proper sense of the word. So there would be some sort of emotional component to it. And this emotional component, this is what we learn on the second stage of sadhu sangha, by associating with similarly minded devotees who are loving, snigdha. They have some sneha towards us, they have some sympathy towards us, and they help us to develop this devotional mood. So that's the three essential elements of this sadhusanga stage: initiation, Vaishnava Sadachar, inquiry into Vaishnava Sadachar and trying to learn Vaishnava Sadachar and follow strictly the principles of devotional service, of the saintly behavior in devotional path, and then learning how to associate with the similarly minded devotees and how to extract the best things from them by serving them and by imbibing their mood. And then bhajana kriya comes, as I already said, that this bhajana kriya means, in one sense, in a good sense, an imitation of a bhajana. That's why the third stage doesn't call bhajana, it's called bhajana kriya. You perform something which looks like bhajana, but you're not capable of doing bhajana because you have still obstacles. And these obstacles, basically, the forces which pull you in a different direction. This anarthas which we have on this stage of spiritual development is nothing but very powerful samskaras within our heart, which tells us to enjoy in a certain way, which gives us some desire to be independent. And it's a completely different sort of samskara, because on the path of bhakti we try to develop dependency on the devotees, we try to develop submissive attitude, humility, whereas all these samskaras, they tell us you should become proud, you should become the best of all, you should become independent on this thing. So therefore this bhajana kriya is a war. It's a battle, internal battle, which everyone has to experience. These two forces, one force I understand because I have shraddha, and it's firm shraddha in the import of the Shastra. I already understand this is what I need. And at the same time, I see the reality of my heart, the desires which are there, and inevitably there will be some conflict or internal contradiction which we will have to resolve. And therefore, this stage of bhajana kriya, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Madhurya Kadambini calls anishtita bhajana kriya, unstable bhajana kriya. It cannot be stable just because there is an internal conflict. And sometimes we fall prey to these other forces which force us to do something which is contrary to bhakti. Sometimes due to the mercy of devotees, we kind of become re-established in the path of bhakti, but then again we may fall down. So this battle is there. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur very beautifully describes this battle and these stages of instability. And each stage of this instability on the path of bhakti is a particular mixture of these two tendencies. Our previous material tendencies and our spiritual tendencies, would-be spiritual tendencies, or desire to develop spiritually. So when they come in contact in a certain way, we become, or we come to a certain stage of instability, and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur lists 6 stages, or 6 stages of instability, or 6 steps, 6 elements of this battle, internal battle. So let's go through them one by one. I'm sure you have already read about this, but I will try to give some insight of how it is very practical to us, and I will also cite some Prabhupada's letters or some stories from his preaching, which illustrates very clearly how it takes place in the life of neophyte devotees. So it all starts, as we know, from Utsahamai, when one becomes very enthusiastic about bhakti. The initial stage is full of enthusiasm, you're just bubbling of enthusiasm, you're just a little ball of enthusiasm and energy, and you want to convert the whole world into devotional service. And because the world is stupid and doesn't want to be converted, then you try to convert your relatives. And that creates a clash. Because there will be some conflict. So this this initial enthusiasm, it's basically these 6 stages of instability are 6 weaknesses which we will have to overcome. 6 periods of weaknesses, of weakness. And we start with this first one, which apparently looks like, somebody is a very fixed devotee, he is so enthusiastic, he is following everything so strictly. So it looks like he is very strong as a devotee, but this is a period of weakness, of deeply hidden internal weakness, which he tries to hide not only from other people, but only from himself as well. Because he has faith, he has belief in this process, he wants to become like this, like it is described in Srimad Bhagavatam. He wants to become like, Dhruva Maharaj or, some pure devotee. But at the same time, he understands that he has some other desires, and he tries to hide these desires by pretending to be a very firm and very, very enthusiastic. And it's a natural enthusiasm in one sense, but at the same time, it's unnatural. It's basically fanatical enthusiasm. One becomes a fanatic from the very beginning, and that is, rarely avoidable stage. Usually everyone goes through this weakness and become a fanatic of this path, so to speak. And what is more important, again, also one very important thing about these 6 stages of weaknesses is that all 6 stages of weaknesses are signs of immaturity in devotional service, immaturity of our spiritual ego, as I said, because the process of devotional service is the process of maturation of our ego as a servant. So when somebody has immature ego, he has difficulties in entering into meaningful relationship with other people. The somebody who has very mature ego, it's very easy for him to develop meaningful relationship with other people, which are full of service attitude, desire to do, which are good, which are very satisfying. But when somebody is immature, it's very difficult because his ego is very flimsy, it's very vulnerable yet. It's not yet formed. Therefore, these 6 stages of Anishtita Bhajana Kriya is also very problematic stages in our association with other people and with devotees. In each stage of this development, we have certain problems in being incorporated in the society of devotees. So that's what is going on, and that's the problem which everyone encounters on this particular stage of spiritual development. So first is, as I said, utsahamai, or this enthusiasm, or fanaticism. Anyway. This fanaticism, initial fanaticism, it's basically the reason for this fanaticism is that we believe, we have firm belief, but we have very little real spiritual experience. We don't really have yet happiness of which devotional service brings, and therefore we try to compensate this lack of experience by the excess of external activities. And we think that by doing these external activities, we manifest ourselves as a very fixed up devotee and so on and so forth. It's basically, even though it's enthusiasm, and enthusiasm is good, Srila Rupa Goswami says, Utsahan nishaya daryata tat karma pravartanat. But unfortunately, this initial enthusiasm is based on ignorance. It's ignorant enthusiasm. And because it's ignorant enthusiasm, it's not really good, and it creates some undesirable consequences, like ruined relationship with relatives, ruined relationship with other people, with other devotees, because you think I'm the best devotee. I always suspected it, but now it's confirmed. I look around, I don't see anyone who is so fixed up, who is following so strictly. I'm the only one who is following so strictly. This is the sort of attitude, and therefore Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gave an example of a Brahmana boy who just starts learning Sanskrit and grammar, and he gets little first success, and then he starts to look down at other people and say, oh yeah, I'm the best. And this is more or less, the manifestation of pride, because the pride is a very essential quality of a person who is materially conditioned. And therefore we bring this pride into the path of devotional service, and we try to manifest this pride by being excessively enthusiastic, so to speak. I'm a very rare soul. Usually people, they listen some few lectures and they become, I already know everything. And they become very enthusiastic preachers, and God knows what they preach and what it is. But, they really want to preach. There is even a book in ISKCON, it's called You Can Preach. And the whole meaning of this book, that you have to start preaching from the outset. It's true in one sense, but also we have to be very responsible. Preaching is not an easy thing. So this overly enthusiastic, overly zealous devotees, they can ruin so many people. They actually ruin the reputation of our society, because they cheated so many people under the banner of preaching, under the pretext of preaching, and so on and so forth. So, Srila Prabhupada speaks about this fanatical attitude in Bhagavad Gita. In the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he speaks about this, and he said, if you simply stick to your own religious ritualistic principles, don't try to understand the philosophy of everything, then you become fanatic. It's a lecture on Bhagavad Gita. Then you become fanatic. So it's basically this initial enthusiasm is also very rigid stance towards rituals and firm belief in the rituals without deep understanding the meaning of what you're doing. And Prabhupada gave a very beautiful definition of fanatic, which is the same as this first stage of Anishtita Bhajana Kriya Utsahamai. Fanatic means dull-headed rascal. This is what it means. You're not very bright yet. So, and there is some sort of internal conflict, as I say, which one tries to hide. So then what goes next? It's Ganatarala, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Sometimes it's Gana. Gana means very dense. And sometimes it's Tarala. It's very lightly shaky. It's not very dense. So sometimes it's dense, sometimes your practice becomes dense, and sometimes you become very negligent toward your bhakti. And it basically means that because you develop this habit to hide behind the mechanistic, ritualistic practice of devotional service, and you equate devotional service with this mechanistic practice of devotional service. As Prabhupada says, you're hiding from Krishna consciousness behind Krishna consciousness. I don't remember exactly how he says. It's in one purpose in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada says that Arjuna was trying to escape from Krishna consciousness by hiding behind Krishna consciousness. He's putting Krishna conscious front, but he's trying to escape Krishna consciousness internally. So because you develop this habit and you equated Krishna consciousness with the ritualistic, not very deep practice of Krishna consciousness, your practice becomes very dry. It doesn't bring you satisfaction, and because it doesn't bring you satisfaction, it's not going very deep, then this stage of Ganatarala comes into being, because sometimes you enthusiastic, sometimes you lose enthusiasm. And basically, it means that you're very much dependent on the praise which other devotees give to you. If other devotees are praising you, you become conditioned on the appreciation of other devotees. If other devotees say, "Oh, Jai, Ki Jai, you distributed so many books, you are such a nice devotee, you are doing this and that," then you become enthusiastic. I remember very clearly when the first group of Russian devotees came to India. It was in '89. There was a big group of these devotees, and there was one devotee. He was very enthusiastic. He was really enthusiastic. When he would lead kirtan, he would inspire everyone. He was, beating the drum, mridanga, and chanting so loudly, and he was just, smiling. But as soon as somebody else would start leading kirtan, he would become really morose. You would look at him and, you would say, something is wrong, you're sick or what? So this Ganatarala, sometimes you're enthusiastic if you are being appreciated, if other people praise you, and then immediately you lose enthusiasm, especially if somebody chastises you, especially if your guru chastises you. Who he thinks he is? What right does he have? It's a very ungrateful sort of business to chastise somebody. If somebody says something which you don't like, it's really, devotional service. You really think, why did I choose this society? Maybe I should go somewhere else. Really, people do think like this. But because they have this dridhavrata, because they have faith, they still remain. They can go through this stage, which is difficult stage in development. And Prabhupada, he says actually, then when one does this sadhana bhakti in a mechanical way, then it becomes very difficult task. If you perform this Mangalarati, Srila Prabhupada says, nicely, then your routine work of the day begins very nicely. So you should be very much careful about it. Not that it has become a hackneyed engagement. You feel like that, then gradually it will be, if you feel like that, then gradually you will be lost. If you feel that this is just some burden which you have to do, then gradually you will lose this. If you feel like that, but if you feel here is a routine work, duty, so that I keep fit myself to devotional service, therefore these things are introduced. So it's next stage actually is a certain attitude towards our routine duties in devotional service. We have to really understand how by performing this sadhana I am bringing myself closer to the goal. And if I lose this sight of the goal, then it will be very difficult and I will become conditioned from the praises of other devotees and from the appreciation and from so many other things, which is not very good. The next stage is very interesting, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he goes into very long and protracted explanation of the next stage, which is called Vyuda Vikalpa. And Vyuda Vikalpa means choosing between different possibilities. You see the different possibilities and you are undecided. You don't know which possibility to choose. He takes an example of somebody who wants to get married at one point and then he changes his mind and he wants to remain a brahmachari or sannyasi, and then he changes his mind and he says, no, it's better to be married, and then he changes his mind and then he says, no, it's better to become a sannyasi. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains this Vyuda Vikalpa in a very humorous way, and he shows how this is Shastriya Shraddha, because in every stage of his undecisiveness, he quotes a Shastra. He is not speculating himself. It's intense speculation, but it's a speculation on the basis of Shastra. What should I take? Why? Because even though he has firm faith in Shastra, he understood what Shastra means, what Shastra wants him to do, but he doesn't really understand the balance between different statements of the Shastras. He doesn't understand what fits to him, to his particular situation, and what is against his adhikar. And therefore, Guru is so necessary on this stage, because one becomes really, mental in this stage of spiritual development, and he is trying to define the priorities in his life, and he cannot define the priorities. What should I do? Should I do book distribution, or should I do street harinams, or should I just develop a nice family, or should I, preach all over the world, or should I, do something else? So many possibilities he has, so many, and he doesn't know what to do, really. So this Vyuda Vikalpa, the stage of undecisiveness, is very important stage of our spiritual development. And again, it may be, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur only gives this one example. Should I become renounced, or should I remain as an attached householder and practice devotional service in this stage? But it can be, should I be engaged in business, or should I give up my business and do something simple, not to be too much engaged in this? It can be, should I, get some flat and rent out this flat and go to Mayapur to perform bhajan, or should I be actively involved in this life? Should I, study Shastra, or should I chant more rounds? Should I do 2 parikrama a day, or 3 parikrama a day, or whatever? And so many other possibilities are there which are colliding within ourselves, and we're trying to understand what we should do. So basically, we will not go into details of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's description, although it's also described in stages. He didn't describe, he describes the initial stage of these doubts, then the more developed stage of this doubt, more developed stage of this doubt. Ultimately, he decides to become a sannyasi, and then he decides to become a sannyasi. This is very relevant to this particular group of people. He has a firm decision, I'll become a sannyasi, and then he takes sannyas and then gets married. So that's his final decision. And Prabhupada was saying this is not the first time. Prabhupada said that so many people, wanted to become sannyasi. He gave them sannyas, then they got married. And it's basically, Prabhupada, he says in one conversation, although behind the sex life there are so many troubles, still the rascals do not cease. Either illicit sex or legal sex. Legal sex, you beget children, and there are so many troubles. You have to raise them nicely. You have to give them education. You must be situated in distinct something. That is the duty of father. Otherwise, he would go on begetting like cats and dogs, no responsibility. Just like some of our students, immediately married. And again, give me sannyasa. What is this? Irresponsible. That's all. Irresponsibility. So basically, it's very interesting what is behind this stage of instability. As I said, each of the 6 stages of instability is a particular battle which we have to win within ourselves. And first battle is the battle with, our humble position as a neophyte devotee, whereas we want to pretend and to project ourselves as a great devotee, and therefore we take this attitude of complete enthusiasm and devotional service. Second stage, over-dependence on the opinion of other people and mechanical sadhana which doesn't bring satisfaction. Third battle is the battle to avoid responsibility. Devotional service means to take responsibility for our own life, for the life of other people, for some particular service, but we want to avoid responsibilities, and therefore we're flip-flopping. We're taking one possibility, then another possibility, then another possibility. We basically, again, hiding from the responsibilities. Therefore, Prabhupada says it's irresponsible. You take something, you make an act, but you don't want to deal with the consequences. Therefore, you use Shastra as the pretext to justify opposite action. That's it. And there is another quote from Srila Prabhupada. So this is the first time in our institution, a Babaji, he's talking about some of his students who has become a Babaji. So it is not to be imitated. It is the Paramahamsa stage. When one is very mature in sannyasa life, for that, not for ordinary person. Don't request, give me sannyas, give me Babaji. Don't do that. This is not a fashion. It is a stage of realization, that's all. So basically, if you have this sort of doubts, it means that you should be, we should not fall prey of this initial attitude to avoid responsibility. Sannyas means very grave responsibility, very serious responsibility, and very difficult one too, because you become always under the spotlight. Everyone is looking at you, and you have to really show the example of your scholarship, example of your preaching and everything. So better not to be in a hurry and really make this decision with full understanding of the consequences. And that's why this Sannyas College is so good, and this particular section is also very relevant for all of us. Those who already have become sannyasis, who want to become sannyasi, it's not an easy thing. So the fourth stage is also very interesting. It's Vishaya Sangraha. Basically means Sangraha means battle. Battle with the desire for sense enjoyment. It's interesting that it doesn't come first. Initially, one can really kind of overcome or neglect different desires of samskaras because the new life of devotional service brings so much excitement in one sense. But then at one point the old samskaras become really prominent. And they surface one after another, and the battle starts. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives a very innocent example. He says that somebody wants to take sweets, and he is giving. He doesn't want to take sweets, but then he falls prey of this weakness. But there are much less innocent samskaras which are there, and there are very powerful vishayas, these poisonous material enjoyments. This material enjoyment or the objects of material enjoyment are called vishaya. Visha means poison. So every attractive material enjoyment has poison inside it. And this poison, when we were engaged, if we were engaged in this sort of enjoyment, this poison is inside us. So it surfaces because of this churning due to the practice of devotional service. This poison of previous material enjoyment, previous habits surfaces like during the churning of the milk ocean. And it becomes a very intense struggle. And basically, this stage of development, spiritual development, means some sort of hypocrisy. Because one may fall prey to this. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that he does fall prey every now and then of the previous habits because he knows that sense objects are against his attachment to the Lord. He knows that by smoking cigarettes or smoking ganja or taking some drugs or engaging in illicit sex relationship, he more or less puts the obstacle between himself and the Lord. Prabhupada said, don't make this cigarette as an obstacle. This little cigarette can become a huge obstacle between you and the Lord. Because you cannot have split attachments. You are either attached to Maya or you are attached to the Lord. You cannot be attached to both. So you have to choose between these two attachments, and because this choice becomes very difficult at this stage of spiritual development, there is some sort of internal duality and hypocrisy, and sometimes one goes in this direction and then he regrets, like it is said in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Veda Dukhatmakam Kaman. He knows that kama is Dukhatmaka, that the very essence of kama, of sense enjoyment, is dukkha. He knows that sense enjoyment ultimately brings grief, unhappiness. But Piyanishvara, Parityaga Piyanishvara, but he cannot give it up completely. Parityaga. Parityaga means, tyaga means to give up. Parityaga means to give up completely, totally, once and for all. He cannot do it. Parityaga Piyanishvara. Even though he knows Vedadukatmakam Kaman. And therefore, Jushamanas tat Kaman. Therefore, he engages in this Jushamanas Chatat Kaman. He follows his desire. But then Shradhalu Drida Nishchayaha. But he continues with the bhajan of the Supreme Lord with Shradhalu. And he has Drida Nishchaya. He tries to do it. But he also he becomes very remorseful in this regard. So basically that means that we sometimes in the path of devotional service, the previous habits appear and we commit some sinful activities. It happened during Prabhupada's time. This is an excerpt from Hari Shauri's Transcendental Diary. It's about thievery in ISKCON's temple, how the disciples of Srila Prabhupada became thieves and started committing some, thievery in the temples, taking some money and using it for sense enjoyment. It's unfortunately happens. Because of economic hardships everywhere in India, the incidence of thievery by low-class persons is fairly common. And even in our temples, it's fairly frequent. Even though condemnable, it is somehow rather understandable. But later, Prabhupada made a telling comment. I thought it was just the Indians, but now the Westerners are stealing as well. He was disgusted with the behavior of his wayward disciple. I will avoid telling the name. He told me very frankly, this is why this disciple has become a sannyasi. And he committed a theft. He committed a theft. He collected a lot of money and took all this money and left the movement, even though he was a sannyasi already. And Prabhupada says, this is why my god brothers criticize. This man come and insist, give me sannyasa, give me sannyasa. Why? What is the attraction? Then when they have it, they again fall down. One becomes a first-class thief and woman hunter. Another goes back to his wife. What is the use of such sannyasa? Anyway, he mentions the name of this sannyasi disciple. Is intelligent and was doing very nicely in Africa. Now he is a third-class thief. And then he quotes some other name of some other disciple. Such and such was such a nice brahmachari and sannyasi. I was expecting him to do something wonderful. Now he is a demon. So this is how it works. Nice brahmachari, nice sannyasi, preaching very nicely. And then this stage comes. Because prematurely you taken renunciation, you haven't really overcome all this internal struggle, and because this internal struggle is still there, then some fall down takes place. And then there is some examples from the life of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. Some brahmachari came to him and was serving him, was even cooking to him, and then he also committed a theft. And Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, because he committed a theft and because he was cooking for him, he refused to eat anything, and he refused to eat any cooked food, and he started eating raw rice soaked in water. So it's not for the first time it happens. Some sort of hypocritical attitude due to this intense internal struggle, which is not yet over on this stage of spiritual development. And then the next two stages, the fifth and the sixth stage, are extremely important and relevant for every one of us. The next stage is the fourth was Vishaya Sangraha, and the next is Niyama Akshama, the inability to keep the vows. It basically means that one more or less overcame this this unstable, more or less this intense desires to enjoy intense samskaras, they become weakened. In yoga, this stage of samskara is called tanu. Tanu means weakened samskara. It's there, but it's very weak. It doesn't really trouble you. You can revive it if you want to enjoy, but basically it's just laying there dormant and saying, I'm here in case you need me, but you starved this samskara to a certain extent and became weak, and you became a little more strong in devotional service. And then the next stage comes when you start giving unrealistic vows. I will chant 2 lakhs of Hare Krishna mantra a day and not a single holy name less. And then for some time you follow this vow and you are very happy about this, and you tell everyone, I did it. I made it. But then you cannot keep the vow. So this stage of spiritual development is a hidden rivalry. We want to show everyone that we're better than other people. So again, the subtle pride it's all manifestation of pride, and the pride becomes more and more and more and more subtle in all these stages of instability in devotional service. So why do you give unrealistic vows? Because you want to show others that you're better than them, that you're more advanced, and you basically want to jump over your own head and show to yourself and to everyone else how advanced you are. And Prabhupada actually says that this is an inevitable stage in our spiritual development, when we become envious of other God brothers and want to show that we are better than them. He writes in one letter, "So far I have studied Siddha Swarupa." I'll tell the name, it's famous. "He is not a bad boy, but he has his own philosophy from the very beginning. It is almost inevitable that there should be enviousness among the God brothers, just like amongst my God brothers." Srila Prabhupada gives an example of his elevated God brothers who were disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And after the departure of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and even during his presence, very intense competition started. Very fierce rivalry started. And we know when Prabhupada left, this competition or rivalry, which was there, which was somewhat subdued due to his presence, also became very prominent at one point in our society, and everyone was trying to show that I'm more advanced. And the desire was to show I'm advanced in devotional service. This, in one sense, it's a good desire. But Prabhupada says it's almost inevitable that there should be enviousness among the God brothers, just like among my God brothers. And Prabhupada, there was this story during Prabhupada's time when one of his disciples, an American devotee, black devotee, who went to Africa and was preaching there very nicely, but then he became disgusted with the misbehavior of other devotees. Again, as I said in the beginning, all these stages, they manifest certain troubles in relationship with other devotees. Because of the immature ego, because our spiritual ego is not mature enough, we cannot really function properly in the relationship with devotees, cannot really serve the devotees, cannot really find the happiness in serving other devotees. And therefore, we find ourselves in trouble with other devotees. So this is what happened with one of his disciples, who was really a good preacher, and but he became disgusted with other devotees. He saw that they follow very low standards, and he wanted to follow very high standard. He went to Mayapur, and he wanted to chant many lakhs a day, 3 lakhs a day, not less than this. And he asked Prabhupada, can he build a house on a tree? He didn't want to associate with other devotees, so he wanted to have a house on a tree so that nobody would disturb his bhajan, so to speak. And Prabhupada says, you know, you will be living like a monkey on a tree. You know, that was Prabhupada's comment, nothing else. You know, he saw that he is doing something glorious, but Prabhupada immediately saw that there is some selfish interest behind this. And it displayed. So for some time he was practicing bhajan in Mayapur on a tree or somewhere in a field without associating with anyone. Then he again left and went to Nairobi back. Then he went back, came back to Vrindavan. And he wrote a very nice, very interesting letter to Srila Prabhupada. Please listen. It's very he wrote to Srila Prabhupada, I don't want to act whimsically, and I only want to please you, Prabhupada. And then he says, we have no love for Krishna, but we have this attraction to serve Krishna as a servant of the confidential servant maids of Krishna. By your mercy, we understand that we cannot go to Vrindavana by any ticket. So we are, by the grace of Krishna, trying to fix our mind on this service in Vrindavana. This fixing of the mind is dependent on my chanting Krishna's names. And my chanting Krishna's names is simply dependent on your mercy, because my god brothers do not like me chanting. Why they don't like him chanting? Because he has competition. We do not want to commit offenses to our god brothers. Yet sometimes when I tell them I only want to hear about Krishna in Vrindavana, or the glories of his holy name or qualities, some say we must talk of other things. They are more pure than my sinful self. As far as this living entity, he only wants to hear or talk of Krishna. My god brothers, as far as I am concerned, are better and more advanced. But because of my sinful condition, if you would allow me to chant these few extra rounds, read your books, and render some small devotional service, maybe before leaving this body, Krishna will allow this sinful living entity to be elevated on the position of one of his loving servants. It is our only desire to have our devotional creeper take shelter of Goloka Vrindavana and to somehow or other please our spiritual master in Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's reply to him was quite terse. So, why did you leave Mayapur if you are so expert in chanting? Read my books and do some menial service, but why have you left Mayapur? You are restless. So, what can be done? You were chanting in Mayapur. Wherever you may live, you have to abide by the order of authority. Because you are restless, you are not fit for chanting absolutely. So that was a very stern reply of Srila Prabhupada that, he's saying so many nice words. I am dependent on you. I want to become a servant of the pure servant of Lord Krishna and develop the mood of the eternal associates of Vrindavana. But behind that, there is only one thing. I want to become better than others. And I want to only speak about Krishna, and my god brothers don't appreciate it. Basically, my god brothers don't appreciate me and don't understand how I am elevated. So this Niyama Akshara is another pitfall on this path of devotional service. And then the last sixth stage of this Anishtita Bhajana Kriya is Taranga Rangini, the enjoyment on the waves. Taranga means waves. Rangini, you are kind of enjoying on the waves. It's basically that's the highest stage of instability. The most subtle stage of internal instability, most subtle battle which is there within our heart when the desire to serve Krishna is fighting with the desire to enjoy. And ultimately, at this stage, it's very difficult to avoid it because you're enjoying your achievements, quote unquote, in devotional service. You already achieved some stability. You overcame already the stages of this Vyudavikalpa and Niyama Akshama and this Sangraha, Vishaya Sangraha. all these stages are passed. You achieve some stability. For quite a long time you practice devotional service, but still this subtle pride is there. And people start praising you, you're so stable, you're so nice, you Srila Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he says that the devotee who achieves some sort of stability becomes very attractive. His attractiveness is very, very strong. He wants to, and then it's very easy to try to exchange this attractiveness to some cheap material pleasures in this material world, subtle material pleasures, like the enjoyment of the followers. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he quotes an aphorism. He says it's a very ancient aphorism. Jananuraga prabhava hi sampad. That by the influence of this attractiveness, when you attract other people, the followers, anuraga, jana anuraga, prabhava, you have this prabhava, the influence over other people become your followers, and it brings hisampad, it brings money to you. And we all know how it works. You become a devotee and you're sannyasi, and all of a sudden everyone is just running towards you and bringing you some donation. And bringing you some sort of gifts. And it's very difficult to avoid this temptation not to enjoy this. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, while describing the difficulties in devotional service, he says that this is actually one manifestation of Dhenukasura, the desire to enjoy the fruits of one's devotional service. I was performing devotional service. I achieved certain stage of devotion. I became attractive. Why not enjoy it? I deserved it, isn't it? I worked hard. I already achieved so many, wonderful things. I know Shastra. I know so many other things. I chant very stably. So that's what is happening on this particular stage. And if we are ambitious by nature, and many of the devotees came from this ambitious sort of background, we wanted to get the best. I'm a very ambitious person. And, so many other people too. So if they have some certain ability to speak, influence other people, and if they achieve this stability, people start worshipping them, more or less. And if they start worshipping him, then, they become his followers, loyal followers, and he became a guru, and sometimes prematurely became a guru. This particular stage of spiritual development, and Prabhupada will say this in some connection, it's actually desire to become a guru prematurely. When you're not mature enough to digest all this worship and adoration, which is, in one sense, natural when you become a guru, and when you use all these facilities for your own benefit, your own aggrandizement, your own enjoyment. So that's a very relevant stage, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives a very nice description of it. And I wanted to read an excerpt from a very nice letter which Prabhupada has written to one of the followers of Siddha Swarup Ananda Maharaj, who was one of those very ambitious people. He was a spiritual master before he became Prabhupada's disciple. He was sort of New Age guru. He had followers. He became Prabhupada's disciples. He was very impressed by Srila Prabhupada. But then he always remained this profile of a guru. And he kind of subtly preached to others that he's special and he has this, special position. And he attracted so many followers already within Prabhupada's movements. Initially, all his former disciples became Prabhupada's disciples, but he retained this entourage. And Prabhupada writes a letter to one of his followers who was saying that he is great, he is a great devotee, I want to follow only him, and I want to worship him, and I want to go to the spiritual world only with him and behind him, and to be in the spiritual world only with him. So Prabhupada writes to him, but I think you have got the mistaken idea in this connection. You speak of a pure devotee, that he is Shakti Avesha Avatara, that we should obey him only. These things are the wrong idea. If anyone thinks like that a pure devotee should be obeyed and no one else, that means he is a nonsense. I will repeat this. This is a very beautiful. If anyone thinks like that a pure devotee should be obeyed and no one else, that means he is a nonsense. We advise everyone to address one another as Prabhu. Prabhu means master. So how the master should be disobeyed? Others, they are also pure devotees. All my disciples are pure devotees. Anyone sincerely serving the spiritual master is a pure devotee. It may be Siddha Swarupa or others are Siddha Swarupa. Srila Prabhupada uses this non-Siddha Swarupa, Asiddha Swarupa. This must be very clearly stated. It's not only that your Siddha Swarupa is a pure devotee and not others. He just calls your Siddha Swarupa. He writes to his disciple who has become, de facto a disciple of this Siddha Swarupa. And therefore he says, it's not that your Siddha Swarupa is a pure devotee and not others. Do not try to make a faction. Siddha Swarupa is a good soul, but others should not be misled. Anyone who is surrendered to the spiritual master is a pure devotee. It doesn't matter if Siddha Swarupa or non-Siddha Swarupa. Amongst ourselves, we should respect others as Prabhu, master, one another. As soon as we distinguish, here is a pure devotee, here is a non-pure devotee, that means I am a nonsense. Why you only want to be in spiritual sky with Siddha Swarupa? Why not all? If Siddha Swarupa can go, why not everyone? Siddha Swarupa will go, you will go, Shyamasundar will also go, and others will go. We will have another ISKCON there. So that's probably bad news for some. Again, as I said, the same sort of dynamic or manifestation of the immature ego, then you become prematurely spiritual master. You create your own followers. You preach to them how you're special, how all kinds of miracles happen to you, and your Shalagram Shila steals your sweets when you offer them, and so many other stories you tell them, or whatever is there. And Prabhupada, he after that said, falsely one tried to gain worship for himself as saintly, renounced person. For ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada was recently emphasized, it's probably from Harishauri, no, from Satsvarup Maharaj. from his book. For ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada has recently emphasized that sannyasi, other than the spiritual master, should be offered obeisances only once, when seeing them in the morning. Also, one does not take anyone's remnant except his spiritual masters. A sannyasi does not leave any remnants. So Prabhupada, he saw how ambitious people among his leading disciples, they started this, fall prey of this thing, went into this pitfall, and started enjoying the benefits of devotional service. And then some other quotes are there. So that's this description of Anishtita Bhajana Kriya. And before going any further, we have to very clearly understand these sources of instability. Reach the stability, which means Trinadapi Sunichira, Sunichina Tarorapi Sahishnuna Amanina Manana Kirtaniya Sadahari. The stage when we don't desire any respect to ourselves, when we are ready to offer respect to anyone else, when we are more tolerant than the tree, more humble than the blade of grass. That's Nishta. That's already a good platform. That's a safe platform. Before that, it's not safe. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur beautifully described all these instabilities, and we can see this. And basically, when we don't resolve these problems, which we inevitably face in the path of devotional service, and these problems become institutionalized, like somebody prematurely becomes a spiritual master, and that becomes fixed, is institutionalized, then the problems of all his followers will be there. And we more or less fix these problems within the institution. And when this problem become real big movement or institution, it becomes sampradaya, apasampradaya. What is apasampradaya? Apasampradaya is nothing but institutionalized problems. The problems of leaders which become institutionalized. That's what we have to avoid. Luckily, we have Srila Prabhupada, his glorious example, his teachings, and his personal example, how he perfectly behaved himself in different situations. He showed to us what to do. And we should follow him very, very strictly. Actually, his example for us is even more important than the Shastra, because we cannot interpret Shastra ourselves. When we start interpreting Shastra ourselves according to our whims, it basically, we are, subtly follow our own anarthas. And we try to adjust Shastra to ourselves. But the example of sadhu, therefore, Narottam Das Thakur, when he says about these three sources of pramana, he says first sadhu, then Shastra, then Guru. Sadhu, Shastra, Guru, Vakya. Chitete Kori Aikya. So he first emphasizes very strongly the example of a sadhu, previous devotee of Acharya, who sets by his behavior the standard. And only by following him very strictly we will be able to overcome all these pitfalls in the path of devotional service. And therefore, this devotion to Guru is very important. We are personal movement. Bhakti is very personal. It means that we have to have personal relationship. And before we develop the stage of Nishta, achieve the stage of Nishta, there will be difficulties and troubles in associating with other people, unfortunately, because we are proud. And the pride will manifest in one way or another, and then it will somehow or other, how to say this, spoil our relationship with other devotees and make them, little not so stable. So that's why it is. And I reformulated this 6 crises of instability in regard to the relationship with one's guru, because we also can see that in relationship with guru, sometimes people become very restless. It has always been there. There were such disciples during Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada's time. There were such disciples during Prabhupada's time. Some of his Sanskrit editors came to him and said, "Please bless me to find a pure devotee, bona fide spiritual master." And Srila Prabhupada said to him, "Yes, I bless you to go to hell." So that was his blessing. So we sometimes can see that this sort of unsteadiness or restlessness due to this anishtita nature of psychology, this restless mind is manifest in our relationship with Guru. So in the first stage, Utsahamai, a devotee starts listening to his guru, and then he develops this Utsahamaya and he says, "Yeah, I know this everything, I know everything. I know almost the same as he. I can quote even better quotes and everything." And, I follow sadhana sometimes even more strictly than him, so I'm better. And the second stage, Ganatarala, one develops this attitude, he doesn't inspire me. It means anymore. He doesn't inspire me anymore. It means something is wrong with him. Because on the second stage, one loses enthusiasm. Before he was so inspired, then he loses enthusiasm and he says, "Yes, something is wrong with my guru. He doesn't inspire me anymore." And then Vyuda Vikalpa, of course, one starts thinking, maybe I have chosen wrong guru. It's probably a wrong guru. That's why I have all these problems. If I have chosen the right guru, I probably would be better off. So this is the third stage. The fourth stage, when one feels this very intense desire for sense enjoyment and he cannot overcome this desire, he blames Guru and he says, "Guru didn't," and I heard this so many times, "Guru didn't help me to get rid of my problems and anarthas. He didn't give me the proper method. He didn't teach me how to get rid of all these problems. That's why I'm in this situation." And then on the fifth stage, when this spirit of competitiveness, rivalry develops, when one achieves certain stage of stability, one says, "Oh, my guru doesn't follow very high vows. I should find somebody who is more elevated than him. I should go to some other holy place and find somebody who is following higher standards of devotional service." And then the sixth stage is very simple. I'm guru myself, so what to do? I'm already there. So that's how you can reinterpret these stages or translate these stages in relationship to the spiritual master. So I think I should finish here. We still have a couple of minutes left before our time is off. Is there any question or we should stop?
Харе Кришна, дорогой Махарадж, у меня вопрос.
Yes.
Харе Кришна, I have a question.
Yes.
Дорогой Махарадж, спасибо большое за глубокую лекцию. Я хотел уточнить по второй лекции вашей. Вы когда упоминали два вида веры, Свабхавики и Балатупадита, это цитата Вишванатха Чакраварти Такура или Джива Госвами?
Vishwanath
Thank you
Chakravarti.
very much for deep class. I wanted to ask you about these two kinds of bhakti. Was it a quote from
Shraddha.
Vishwanath Chakravarti or from Jiva Goswami?
Two kinds of Shraddha. Yes, it's
Two kinds of Shraddha.
yes. Swabhaviki and Balatutpadita, that's the classification of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Prabhupada in Madhurya Kadambini. And Srila Jiva Goswami, he classifies differently. He says that it's Shastriya Shraddha or Lokika Shraddha or Samajika Shraddha. Lokika, he says in Bhakti Sandar. But it's basically the same thing.
Спасибо большое. Хорошо, спасибо большое.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for the class. Just would like to find out the reference for the letter that the devotee from Nairobi.
I think it is in Harishauri. Harishauri's. Let me see. This should be. Yes, it's Harishauri. 1 second. Yeah. It's the Transcendental Diary of Harishauri, volume number 1. The date is 25th of February 76. He quotes this letter from this devotee who preached in Nairobi and then went to Mayapur and then went back to Nairobi and then came to Vrindavan.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, I just had a question. You were speaking about responsibility and commitment. And what kind of occurred to me was that at the moment, many of us are in a situation where we're in a temple or a certain community where we have a specific service, responsibility, and therefore to some extent that responsibility and commitment comes because we're very much accountable to something very specific. But as we make a transition towards sannyasa and we're moving away from managerial commitments or specific posts or positions within a temple and we're traveling, we're visiting yatras more, can you just say something about how we can ensure that we still maintain that responsibility and commitment, because sometimes it can be that we do a lot of preaching, but we may not be taking responsibility for the development of the movement in a very tangible way.
Thank you very much. It's a very nice question. Therefore, in this recent years, the sannyasis, they get some mission, and that's basically some task which they are supposed to perform, to take the responsibility. Sannyasi doesn't mean that you just preach and don't take any particular responsibility. It's actually very grave responsibility to preach, because when we open our mouths, it means that we more or less telling people that we ourselves are according to what we are supposed to say, what we are saying. So our first and foremost responsibility is, of course, our sadhana, our performing of devotional service and studying. And that's first and foremost responsibility of a sannyasi. But also, we have to take personal responsibility, because what will happen inevitably when we preach, people will become inspired. They will develop some sort of personal relationship with us. And we have to take responsibility for their spiritual development, helping them selflessly to develop spiritually. It's not that we just, travel here and there and, get donation and, fly to another destination. If somebody develops faith because of our preaching, we have to continue cultivating these people. That's the most important. And another one is that, when we come to the temple, we are servants of the temple president, those people who took responsibility locally, and our duty is to ask them what we are supposed to say. It's not that we are self-manifest acharya and we know better what to say. Sometimes people, they create mess by their preaching because, those people who know particular situation very nicely, they know the mentality, they know the problems of the people. They try to, emphasize certain things to help people to overcome their difficulties, and then somebody else comes and starts preaching something which is in discord with the work, more or less negates the diligent work which the local authorities were doing. That's definitely disservice. That creates chaos in the minds of people because you're sannyasi, you carry some authority, people will listen to you, people will take you seriously. So that's the proper etiquette. We are servants, we come to the temple as a servant. Therefore, we have to come to local authorities. We say, here I am, how can I serve you? This is the etiquette which Srila Prabhupada established when there was initially this problem or clash between sannyasis and the householders, temple presidents. He said, sannyasi comes, he has to be assistant of the local authorities. So this is how we responsibly perform our duties in this regard.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, dear Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Maharaj, your servant Pran Govinda Das.
Pran Govindaji, you wrote to me that you're not going to be in the class because it's too early. I read your message this morning.
Well, it was such a fascinating, I thought you were reading my life. I was like, it's so amazing, Maharaj. The way you spoke, it was like experiential knowledge, and now you have a realized knowledge. It was so effective. I really appreciate. I do, Maharaj.
Thank
You are
you.
wonderful. I wish you would teach this every day to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I guess we should finish now. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention and for your service and for everything you are doing to inspire other people on the path of devotional service. And I wish you the best in your devotional endeavors. Thank you. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.